We worship your lotus feet, which are difficult to attain for men who have a strong attachment to the body, to the house, and to possessions, who think in terms of me and mine, although you are present in our body. Purport. The Lord is present in the heart of every living being, just like a neutral observer, and he cannot be realized only by his surrendered devotees. For the one who illusions the family connections and also who is searching for material position, it is very difficult to be able to understand this reality, but to speak of realizing it.
Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Tistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Sarasvati Devi Kauravadi Kacharine Jai Shesha Sunyavari Kachachari Shatari Panchakar Pattara Jatsa Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patikanam Pavarego Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
C'est un verset.
It is a verse which explains the foundation of life in the material world. Brahmaji, he explains that this world is governed by an attraction, which is very powerful. It's the sexual attraction. He explains it is just like a chain which is bounding the living entity in the cycle of birth and death. To this attraction, he desires a spouse, a home, children, possessions, unlimited desires. Just one desire, it makes it that millions of desires appear. It is without end. And these desires, they bring a continuity in the next life to fulfill our desires. When we die, we take birth again to continue, etc., etc. So it is a chain which is impossible to surpass on our own. Impossible. Because this sexual attraction, it is connected to the conditioning itself of the living entity. And especially to the two modes of passion and ignorance. All living beings in this world are connected to the three gunas. As soon as we touch the material energy, then we become conditioned. This is what Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. So, how to make it, to be successful, because the solution is there. Certain religions, they will amplify this tendency. Why? Because the living beings have such strong desires that if the Lord do not engage their desires, then they cannot accept the Supreme Lord. So in these paths, which are connected to karma, we put in the forefront family life. If you accomplish your duty perfectly through family life, then you can obtain the attainment of a better world, a better position, what we call the heavenly planets. But Krishna explains that in the Gita, that the living beings who are not focused on Him, on His devotional service, they're always attracted by these desires, by these portions of the Vedas, which are just like like a field of flowers. Why do we say fields that are full of flowers? Because it attracts the living entities. You can have much more pleasure, a long life, without illnesses, where you will be able to rejoice in a wonderful way, unlimitedly. So people who are naturally a little pious, who have accomplished lives in their previous lives, certain pious activities, and who have this credit to be able to believe in an absolute truth, which is not necessarily like defined, because often it is impersonal, we cannot see it, it cannot truly have two names, attributes, and forms. But the truth appears as a way to fulfill our desires. So it is acceptable. And those who have a little bit of pious activities, then they engage in this path. So we won't quote examples, but everybody can understand which are these kinds of paths. And so, due to this, the living entity can progress, because he accepts at least the Lord in his life. So it is good, but it doesn't solve the problem of life, because through these paths, we cannot liberate ourselves from the attachment to the body. We can simply make it that it brings a superior happiness. It doesn't bring any reactions, negative reactions of karma, vikarma. But it brings karma, pious activity. And pious activity, it doesn't stop the fact of wandering in this material world. Krishna says in the Gita, he says, when they have consumed, when they have attained on these planets of delight, and they consume the most of the pious activities, they must take birth on earth. So what is the use of accomplishing these activities that make us take birth again and again? Since when we will come back in this material world, we will be attached again to family life, to children, to wealth, etc. So, why the Srimad Bhagavatam is depicting these attributes of the material nature? It is to make us understand that there is a superior goal. And for why? For what? Because in the transcendental world, Krishna's world, all these realities exist, but in eternity. And they are true. Because the Lord Himself defines Himself as a person having qualities, having a form, but having pastimes. And when we speak about pastimes, we speak about associates. We speak about a world. We speak about eternal beings with whom the Lord has relationships of love. So in His sweetness, Krishna, what is the characteristic of this? It is that in this sweet nature, Krishna, the Lord, He hides His opulences to reveal His sweetness. So there are houses. In these houses, His associates are present. They have a father, a mother, cousins, etc. Activities. And Krishna Himself, who is the Supreme Lord, who is the origin of everything, in this sweetness, He accepts a father, a mother, brother, friends, lover, and a role. Still, He is beyond everything.
Parce que
But because
il a cette qualité
he has this quality
de donner du plaisir,
to give pleasure,
d'être l'objet de l'amour.
to be the object of love.
Alors son monde à lui,
So his world,
il est comme
it is just
la
like
réalité.
the
Le monde
reality.
matériel, il est comme la réflexion.
And the material world is just like the reflection.
Quand Brahma, il a
When
vu
Brahma,
le
he
monde
saw
transcendantal,
the
quand le
transcendental world,
Seigneur lui est apparu et qu'il lui a
when
fait
the
voir
Lord
son
appeared to
monde,
him and he showed him his world,
ce qu'il a vu,
what he saw,
il en a fait une création.
he made a creation out of it.
Mais à travers sa passion,
But through his
c'est
passion,
devenu le reflet
it became
de la réalité.
the reflection of
C'est
reality.
pourquoi,
That is why
lorsqu'on s'attache
when we attach
à la
ourselves
vie de famille,
to family
on
life,
devient
we
conditionné.
become
dans le monde
conditioned in the material world.
matériel. Mais quand cette même
But when this
personne
same person
s'attache à Krishna et à
attaches
son
himself or
monde,
herself to
et
Krishna and his
devient
world
identifié
and
comme
becomes
la famille de
identified
Krishna,
like Krishna's
alors il se
family,
libère.
then he liberates oneself.
Et il obtient une position
And he
éternelle
obtains an
dans
eternal
les
position
divertissements du Seigneur.
in the pastimes
Mais la
of the Lord.
différence, c'est
But the
que
difference
Krishna
is that
explique
Krishna
celui qui
explains
atteint ma demeure,
the one who
il
attained
ne
my
revient
abode,
jamais dans
he
le
never
monde.
comes back in the material
Il
world.
devient
He
éternellement
becomes
libre.
eternally liberated.
C'est ça la différence.
This is the difference.
C'est pourquoi, en tant que
This
dévot
is
du
why, as
Seigneur,
devotees of the Lord,
on ne se trompe pas.
we don't deceive ourselves.
Pourquoi?
Why?
Parce que notre foi,
Because our
notre
faith,
réalisation de
our
Krishna,
realization
nous
of Krishna
permet
allows
de
us
réaliser cette
to
foi
realize this
et de
truth
nous libérer
and to
complètement des liens
completely
matériels.
liberate us from material relationships.
Par exemple,
For example,
lorsque quelqu'un souffre et
when
qu'il est
someone
conditionné par la
suffers
matière,
and is conditioned by matter,
alors
then
la souffrance
the suffering
lui fait oublier son
makes him
devoir.
forget his connection with Krishna.
Lorsqu'il devient attaché dans
When he
son-
becomes attached in this
à
world
d'autres êtres vivants,
to other
cet
living beings,
attachement lui
this
fait
attachment
oublier son
makes
lien
him
avec
forget
Krishna.
his connection, his relationship with
On est bien
Krishna.
d'accord. Tout
We are agreeing on this.
nous amène dans
Everything
l'ignorance.
brings us into ignorance.
Mais
But
lorsqu'on arrive
when we arrive
par le processus du
by the
service de
process of
dévotion
devotional service
à s'attacher à
to attach
Krishna,
ourselves to
la
Krishna,
souffrance nous ramène à Krishna.
suffering brings us back to Krishna.
L'attachement matériel nous
Material
ramène à Krishna.
attachment brings us back to
Pourquoi?
Krishna.
Parce
Why?
qu'ils sont comme
Because they are just
une
like
source de
a
souffrance,
source
une
of
source
suffering,
d'oubli.
a source of
Donc,
forgetfulness.
celui qui aime
So the one who loves Krishna,
naturellement,
naturally,
lorsqu'il entre en
when he
contact
enters in
avec la nature
contact with
matérielle,
material
il se
nature,
souvient de Krishna.
he
Tout lui
remembers
fait se
Krishna.
souvenir de Krishna.
Everything makes him
Tout
remember
devient
Krishna.
comme une puissance
Everything becomes like
qui l'amène
a
à
power
aimer Krishna.
that makes him to love Krishna. This cannot be any other
Mais
way.
celui qui n'a pas
But the one who
d'attachement pour
doesn't have
Krishna,
attachment for
oui.
Krishna, then he leaves.
C'est pourquoi
This is why
tout vient
everything comes
de l'amour.
from love.
Cet amour, quand il
This
est
love,
dirigé correctement,
when it is directed
il
properly,
agit
it
comme
acts
une libération.
like a liberation.
Quand cet amour, il
When
est
this
mal
love
dirigé,
is
alors
wrongly
il agit comme un
directed,
conditionnement.
then it acts like a conditioning.
Donc en ce moment,
So right now,
selon la nature de notre
according
amour,
to the nature of our love,
nous avons un conditionnement.
we have a
où nous sommes
conditioning
libérés.
or we are liberated.
C'est pourquoi nos
This is
sentiments,
why our feelings,
ils doivent être bien
they
placés.
must be properly
C'est
placed.
très important.
It's super important
Parce que
because
lorsque nos désirs
when our desires,
matériels
our
grossissent,
material desires, they grow,
qu'on cultive des désirs
that we
matériels,
cultivate material desires,
alors on peut quitter
then we can leave
la voie de la vérité.
the path of truth.
De la même manière,
In the same
lorsqu'on
way,
cultive des désirs
When we
matériels,
cultivate material
on
desires,
abandonne la voie de la vérité.
we abandon the path of ignorance. We cannot have both
Parce que l'attachement
because
matériel
material attachments
n'amène pas la réalisation.
don't bring spiritual
C'est
realization.
pourquoi, à un moment,
This is why at some point,
quand on devient
when
sincère,
we become
on
sincere,
se détache.
we detach ourselves.
Mais le détachement, ça
But
veut
the
pas dire
detachment
physique.
doesn't mean physical.
Hein, souvent,
Often,
les gens s'imaginent pour se
people
détacher.
imagine
on
to
va aller
detach
dans une grotte.
themselves.
C'est pas parce que
We
vous
must
allez
go
dans
into
une
a
grotte
cave.
que
No, it's not
le-
because
le
you go into a
détachement va
cave.
venir.
The detachment will
Vous
come.
pouvez aller dans une grotte et
You can go in a
découvrir
cave and there's
détachement
even more
parce que
attachments
vous êtes attaché.
because you're
En fait,
attached.
le détachement, ça
In
veut
fact,
dire
the
quoi?
detachments,
Ça veut dire
what does it mean?
servir Krishna.
It means to serve Krishna.
Si on sert Krishna,
If we serve Krishna,
alors Krishna se révèle.
then Krishna reveals himself. If we do not do the service, then Krishna doesn't reveal himself. There's no choice. Without service, we are on our own. We cannot escape suffering. We cannot escape attachment. We are prisoners. This is why our acharyas like Srila Prabhupada, they created a means to liberate us. When they manifested temples, books, the teachings, the fact of having the association of sadhus, being able to chant and hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, to live in a holy place, which are the 5 foundational aspects of devotion. So they manifested a means to attach themselves to Krishna and to liberate themselves from all types of suffering. But if we do not have faith and we don't attach ourselves to their lotus feet, to their teachings, then we're alone. We're lost in the material ocean, completely lost. And we can be just next. Just next. Next to it. There are many persons who will come in a temple, for example, but they don't take the opportunity to surrender. And because of this, although they're very close, the problem is not solved. Everything is due to the desire. Where is my desire placed? Is it placed in Krishna or is it placed within me? If it is placed in me, we would just lament for ourselves. There would just be lamentation for ourselves the whole day. When the desires will not be satisfied, then we kind of like, we become, we're pouting. And it increases and increases and increases. Why? It becomes like an echo that destroys everything. And then we see faults everywhere. This is considered to be the mad elephant. We see faults everywhere, even in the truth. But when our desire is well placed, so even if we're in the worst situation, we can be saved. Remember Gajendra. It reminds me of Gajendra, the elephant. Such a powerful elephant. When he was walking, even the mountains were trembling. He was on a special planet. And so, when he bathed, a crocodile caught him by the paw on one of his legs. We saw, in movies or videos, the crocodiles are in the water, and when an animal is drinking, they bite at him. After, they attract him in the water to drown him and to eat him. Well, this crocodile, which was a deva who was cursed before, and Gajendra also was not an ordinary being. So, in the course of destiny, his leg was cut. There was a fight for so many celestial years. But because the crocodile, Srila Prabhupada explains, the crocodile could feed himself in the water and the elephant could not. Then he started to lose his strength, Gajendra. But because in his previous life he was a great devotee of the Lord, at some point in this suffering, he remembered his previous life. And his piety came back. And so he collected the lotus flower with his trunk, and then he offered it to the Lord by surrendering to him.
Mais il a fallu la
But
repentance.
suffering was needed.
Bon, regarde. Il a lutté,
He
et c'est au moment où il a
struggled, and that's the point where he understood that his life was lost, that his remembrance of Govardhan came back. So sometimes this suffering must come to the deepest. You don't want to surrender. Even in suffering, you suffer. Gajendra suffered. There was nothing left. But when it was the extreme, then he remembered. And then after that, the Lord came to save him. Krishna, he always saved his devotees. Stupid, ignorant people who don't have faith, as soon as they suffer, they reject faith. Because they're not devotees. In their heart, they're businessmen. They don't worship the Lord for His happiness. They worship the Lord for their happiness. And when Krishna doesn't reciprocate with them, then they reject the faith. We cannot attain Krishna in this way. It is impossible. We attain Krishna when we accept all situations where He put us, like a mercy. Of course it is hard, but we must accept it. This is the symptom of devotional service. The pure devotees, they don't even want to go back to Krishna. They want to go where Krishna brings them, even to hell. Can you believe it? Because they're satisfied. They want simply to love Him. And in this situation, Krishna comes. Even in the worst, Krishna comes. Why Krishna could not come? If He doesn't come, it's for a reason. It is because someone needs to be in a particular situation. It must purify all the activities that someone did in his previous lives. If suffering comes, it is because it has a cause. There's a justice. And when we suffer, we destroy all the consequences of our actions. It is a reality. There's no choice. Even a devotee must go through suffering. But the difference is that when a materialist suffers, he develops more hatred. Because he will hit on the environment, on the actions of his reactions of his activities. He becomes bounded even more. Like this. He becomes mad. But when a devotee he suffers, he sees simply that his suffering is due to a cause. And this cause, he sees it as a way to take shelter. And he realizes that due to this suffering, he can progress. Because inside, there's a form of illusion. I think I am a great devotee. Oh, I don't know. Something that has nothing to do with me. And Krishna does not want this. He could take away the suffering. But what will the person do? She will come back in her illusion. So, this is for that Krishna, in the path of bhakti, everything is not just like we want. For example, in the path of karma, we can have a form of miracle and come back to a life that we had before. But in the path of bhakti, it is different. This is why sometimes we can even have a life that becomes shorter, because Krishna sees that in this life we will simply develop bad things, and he can even diminish the life of his devotees, okay, so he can take a better birth in his next life, or he can increase the duration of life. Because in this situation, the Lord is just situated in the desire to bring us back to Him. And then from there, an internal transformation must happen. And this is something that we don't want. We are determined to stay in this situation, life after life. It is a reality. We're all satisfied to be in this situation. Krishna is obliged to act. So, how he acts, it is different for everybody. Otherwise, it would take away all the problems. Why do problems stay? Because these problems, they have a means to transform us. If we don't have faith in this anymore, then we fall down. But those who have faith in this, they attain success. They go up to the end. Everything that surrounds us, everything that is there, everything that is within us, they're made to liberate us. We must accept this. When we don't accept this, and we see an injustice, then the effect cannot manifest itself. It is just like a medicine. Sometimes we must take it in a certain way in the Ayurveda, for example, with hot water, 20 minutes before the meal, things that I never follow. But the effect cannot be there. We need a discipline. Well, in the same way, everything is Krishna. Krishna is behind everything. As the Super Soul, He's everywhere present. So when we understand this, we accept our situation like a mercy. If we don't accept it, we lose our faith. It doesn't have any effect anymore. There's no choice. Anyway, due to the karma that we had, the situation should have come. Do you understand? There's no choice. The suffering, it had to come. This is due to the bad activities of the previous lives. In the same way, if we did good activities, we can be happy in this world. But suffering is more favorable because in suffering we take shelter, and in happiness we don't need God. But since it's in happiness we do impious activities, sinful activities because we reject the Supreme Lord, and will act to be happy, and but at some point suffering will come. If it's not in this life, it will be in the next. So this is why the sages, so he doesn't see the suffering in something unfavorable, but like a mercy. Because for a devotee, I do speak for one devotee, for a devotee. He doesn't see suffering like something separated from Krishna. It is hard, but he accepts. And it is like when it comes to the culminating point that he surrenders completely. Just like Gajendra. This is why the story of Gajendra is very important in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It proves this truth, that at some point we'll have no choice. We'll be forced to surrender. Jai.